Hello, my name is Duncan Mackay. I work at ERA Consulting Group Limited, based here in the UK in Cambridge. We're a consulting group of 26 years. We specialise particularly in biologics and particularly in the last period of time in cell and gene therapies. We have a great team that's got a lot of experience both from within industry and academia and from manufacturing, regulatory and also all elements of process control. I think there are two major points to put across here. The first is that recognise please that the manufacturing element is part of the whole overall process of delivering the treatment and the therapy to the patient. So you mustn't overlook your relationship with the treatment centre, with the physician, and building within them and working with them so that they understand the therapy and they understand the capacity and who will be a suitable patient for treatment. They might not be able to tell immediately whether somebody is, but if you can work with them and develop, as you gain experience, develop, if you like, some inclusion-exclusion criteria in the same way that you might do for a clinical trial application in a clinical trial setting, then that can help identify patients who will be suitable, and maybe even we'll get to the point where we can identify measurable parameters that can be tested at that point in time. The important thing in that is that nobody wants to create an expectation or a hope in the patient side of things that they are going to be able to receive a treatment, particularly in this regard that many of these that we've spoken of in the last 2 days are life-saving therapies. So it's very important that we manage the relationship with the treatment centre, the physician, and right in the middle of that sits the patient, always in the centre of things. In some ways that can be simple because our own regulations and our own guidances right now in Europe and in the US and beyond clearly outline some types of procedures that are not regarded as being part of the manufacturing process. So where you supply a product that requires, for example, reconstitution in a buffering situation to administer to a patient, or certain of those other handling procedures, maybe a dilution step, those types of things that are conducted typically in the hospital pharmacy or the hospital treatment room are not considered to be part of the manufacturing, although it's the responsibility of the manufacturer to include within their summary of product characteristics or physician's desk reference that how those should be done. So some very clear instructions, but clearly at that point, that's out with the point of the QP's responsibility. Their responsibility in that situation begins and ends with the release of the product. I think what's different perhaps for cell therapies is that where there are maybe more substantive or more complex manipulations required at the point of care, that's really not quite so clear at present. There are probably not so many examples that people have got a clear idea of where that responsibility should begin and should end. How does it transfer from one person or one entity to another? I think time will tell, but I would still expect that the regulators and the regulations and guidances would be based upon the existing precedents of there are certain steps that can be considered to be under the responsibility of the point of care and certain steps that are under the responsibility of the QP. Quite simply, at the end of the day, the QP is responsible to sign off and say that the product has met the specification and has been manufactured in compliance with all the applicable regulation. If that includes a rapid alert system or a rapid analytical measure, then that's what they're signing off against. It may well be that a subsequent test, which is a more real-time test, or typically perhaps a pharmacopoeial-based test, which is of a longer duration, results come back from that again, it will still be the responsibility for the purposes of the batch record and the completeness of the batch record that the QP would look at those, make sure that they correlate with the value that's been obtained from the rapid system, and if they are in agreement, again, sign off, and that becomes part of the batch record. What becomes interesting, of course, is in the case of microbial contamination, where your rapid system is given a green light and perhaps your pharmacopoeial system gives you a red light, either on something that's not been tested or something that's given a different result, you would probably be then required to follow the compendial method and say it's time to go back to, and again, your relationship with the centre, go back to them and inform them that there's been a different result come back, that you suspect that there may have been contamination of the product, and speak to them and agree with them, again at their discretion, what the appropriate intervention may or may not be with the patient. In the case of a microbial contamination, it would be, is there any evidence of a frank infection being present, any clinical manifestation of what you believe to be the risk? Because the risk is theoretical, the manifestation of it is real. I think it would be great in the future if this was to go on and be held again, then it would be great to have a more clinical representation from clinical practitioners, because we all believe, and we sometimes can become very siloed in our thinking and very focused in the thinking on the manufacturing challenges as manufacturers or as providers. But all these things are contextual, and at the very heart of it lies the patient. And it's a partnership between the developer, the manufacturer, and the physician to make sure that we're all doing the right thing for the patient. They should always be at the heart of our thinking, and therefore it'd be good to see a shared event. It might not be that they want to sit through a lot of the regulatory piece or a lot of the manufacturing piece, but there should be a session where we could have some direct clinical practitioners come in and say, talk about their experience, talk about what works well, talk about their expectations of manufacturers and how they should be interacting with the clinical community.